I set there behind a clump of bushes in about 6 foot of him, and kept my eyes on him steady. It was getting gray daylight now. Pretty soon he gapped and stretched himself and hove off the blanket, and it was Miss Watson's Jim. I bet I was glad to see him. I says, "Hello, Jim," and skipped out. He bounced up and stared at me wild. Then he drops down on his knees and puts his hand together and says, "Don't hurt me, don't. I ain't never done no harm to a ghost. I always liked dead people, and done all I could for 'em. You go and get in the river again what you belongs, and don't do nothing to old Jim, that was always your friend." Well, I warn't long making him understand I warn't dead. I was ever so glad to see Jim. I warn't lonesome now. I told him I warn't afraid of him telling the people where I was. I talked along, but he only set there and looked at me, never said nothing. Then I says, "It's good daylight, let's get breakfast. Make up your campfire good." "What's the use of making up the campfire to cook strawberries on sich truck? But you got a gun, hain't you? Then we can get something better than strawberries." "Strawberries and such truck," I says. "Is that what you live on?" "I couldn't get nothing else," he says. "Why, how long you been on the island, Jim?" "I come here the night after you's killed." "What, all that time?" "Yes, indeedy." "And you hain't had nothing but that kind of rubbish to eat?" "No, sah, nothing else." "Well, you must be most starved, ain't you?" "I reckon I could eat a hoss. I think I could." "How long you been on the island?" "Since the night I got killed." "No! Why, what has you lived on? But you got a gun. Oh, yes, you got a gun. That's good. Now you kill something and I'll make up the fire." So we went over to where the canoe was, and while he built a fire in a grassy open place amongst the trees, I fetched meal and bacon and coffee pot and frying pan and sugar and tin cups, and the nigger was set back considerable because he reckoned it was all done with witchcraft. I catched a good big catfish, too, and Jim cleaned him with his knife and fried him. When breakfast was ready, we lolled on the grass and eat it smoking hot. Jim laid it in with all his might, for he was most about starved. Then when he had got pretty well stuffed, we laid off and lazied. By and by, Jim says, "But looky here, Huck, who was it Dad has killed in that shanty if it warn't you?" Then I told him the whole thing, and he said it was smart. He said Tom Sawyer couldn't get up no better plan than what I had. Then I says, "How do you come to be here, Jim, and how'd you get here?" He looked pretty uneasy and didn't say nothing for a minute. Then he says, "Maybe I better not tell." "Why, Jim?" "Well, they's reasons. But you wouldn't tell on me if I was to tell you, would you, Huck?" "Blamed if I would, Jim." "Well, I believe you, Huck. I run off." "Jim!" "But mind, you said you wouldn't tell. You know you said you wouldn't tell, Huck." "Well, I did. I said I wouldn't, and I'll stick to it. Honest Injun, I will. People would call me a low-down abolitionist and despise me for keeping mum, but that don't make no difference. I ain't a-going to tell, and I ain't a-going back there anyways, so now let's know all about it." "Well, you see, it was this way. Ol' Missus, that's Miss Watson, she pecks on me all the time and treats me pooty rough, and she always says she wouldn't sell me down to Orleans. But I noticed they was a nigger trader round the place considerable lately, and I begin to get uneasy. Well, one night I creeps to the door pooty late, and it don't want quite shut, and I hear Ol' Missus tell the widder she gwine to sell me to Orleans, but she didn't want to, but she could get $800 for me, and it is such a big stack of money she couldn't resist. The widder, she tried to get her to say she wouldn't do it, but I never waited to hear the rest. I lit out mighty quick, I tell you. I tuck out and shin down the hill and spect to steal a skiff along the show somewheres above the town, but they was people a-stirring yet, so I hid in the old tumble-down copper shop on the bank to wait for everybody to go away. Well, I was there all night. They was somebody round all the time. 'Long 'bout 6 in the morning, skiffs begun to go by, and 'bout 8 or 9, every skiff that went along was talking about how yo' pap come over to town and says you's killed. These last skiffs was full of ladies and gentlemen a-going over for to see the place. Sometimes they'd pull up at the shore and take a rest before they started across, so by the talk I got to know all about the killing. I was powerful sorry you's killed, Huck, but I ain't no mo' now. I laid there under the shavin's all day. I was hungry, but I weren't afeared, because I knowed ol' missus and de widder was going to start to de camp meetin' right after breakfast and be gone all day, and dey knows I goes off wid de cattle 'bout daylight, so dey wouldn't 'spect to see me round de place, and so dey wouldn't miss me till after dark in de evenin'. De other servants wouldn't miss me, 'cause dey'd shin out and take holiday soon as de ol' folks is outen de way. Well, when it come dark I tuck out up de river road and went 'bout 2 miles or more to get where dey warn't no houses. I'd made up my mind 'bout what I's a-gwine to do. You see, if I kep' on tryin' to get away afoot, de dogs 'd track me. If I stole a skiff to cross over, dey'd miss dat skiff, you see, and dey'd know about where I land on de other side, and where to pick up my track. So I says, a raft is what I's after. It don't make no track. I see a light a-comin' round de point by, so I wade in and shove a log ahead of me and swum more'n halfway across de river and got in 'mongst de driftwood and kep' my head down low and kinder swum against de current till de raft come along. Den I swum to de stern of it and tuck a holt. It clouded up and 'uz pretty dark for a little while, so I clumb up and laid down on de planks. De men is all way yonder in de middle, where de lantern was. De river was a-risin', and dey was a good current, so I reckoned dat by 4 in de mornin' I'd be 25 mile down de river, and den I'd slip in just before daylight and swim ashore and take to de woods on de Illinois side. But I didn't have no luck. When we was most down to de head of the island, a man begin to come aft with de lantern. I see it weren't no use for to wait, so I slid overboard and struck out for de island. Well, I had a notion I could land most anywheres, but I couldn't. Bank too bluff. I was most to de foot of de island before I founds a good place. I went into de woods and jegged I wouldn't fool wid rafts no more, long as they moved they lantern round so. I had my pipe and a plugger dog leg and some matches in my cap, and they warn't wet, so I was all right. And so you ain't had no meat nor bread to eat all this time? Why didn't you get mud turkles? How you goin' to get 'em? You can't slip up on 'em and grab 'em, and how's a body goin' to hit 'em wid a rock? How could a body do it in de night? And I warn't goin' to show myself on de bank in daytime. Well, that's so. You've had to keep in the woods all the time, of course. Did you hear 'em shootin' the cannon? Oh, yes, I knowed dey was arter you. I see 'em go by here, watched 'em through de bushes. Some young birds come along, flyin' a yard or two at a time and lightin'. Jim said it was a sign it was goin' to rain. He said it was a sign when young chickens flew that way, and so he reckoned it was the same way when young birds done it. I was going to catch some of them, but Jim wouldn't let me. He said it was death. He said his father laid mighty sick once, and some of them catched a bird, and his old granny said his father would die, and he did. And Jim said you mustn't count the things you are going to cook for dinner, because that would bring bad luck. The same if you shook the tablecloth after sundown. And he said if a man owned a beehive and that man died, the bees must be told about it before sunup the next morning, or else the bees would all weaken down and quit work and die. Jim said bees wouldn't sting idiots, but I didn't believe that because I had tried them lots of times myself, and they wouldn't sting me. I had heard about some of these things before, but not all of them. Jim knowed all kinds of signs. He said he knowed most everything. I said it looked to me like all the signs was about bad luck, so I asked him if there weren't any good luck signs. He says, mighty few, and dey ain't no use to a body. What you want to know when good luck's a-comin' for? Want to keep it off? And he said, if you's got hairy arms and a hairy breast, it's a sign dat you's a-gwine to be rich. Well, dey's some use in a sign like dat, 'cause it's so fur ahead. You see, maybe you's got to be po' a long time first, and so you might get discouraged and kill yourself if you didn't know by the sign that you gwine to be rich by'n by. Have you got hairy arms and a hairy breast, Jim? What's the use to ask that question? Don't you see I has? Well, are you rich? No, but I been rich once, and I gwine to be rich again. Once I had $14, but I tuck to speculatin' and got busted out. What did you speculate in, Jim? Well, first I tackled stock. What kind of stock? Why, livestock, cattle, you know. I put $10 in a cow, but I ain't gwine to resk no mo' money in stock. The cow up and died on my hands. So you lost the $10. No, I didn't lose it all. I only lost about 9 of it. I sold a hide and taller for $1.10. You had $1.10 left. Did you speculate any more? Yes, you know that one-legged nigger that belongs to old Mr. Bradish? Well, he set up a bank, and say anybody that put in $1 would get $4 more at the end of the year. Well, all the niggers went in, but they didn't have much. I was the only one to have much. So I stuck out for more'n $4, and I said if I didn't get it, I'd start a bank myself. Well, of course that nigger want to keep me out of the business, because he says there weren't business enough for 2 banks. So he said I could put in my $5, and he pay me $35 at the end of the year. So I done it. Then I reckon I'd invest the $35 right off and keep things a-movin'. They was a nigger named Bob that had catched a wood flat, and his marster didn't know it, and I bought it off'n him and told him to take the $35 when the end of the year come, but somebody stole the wood flat that night, and next day the one-legged nigger said the bank's busted, so they didn't none of us get no money. What did you do with the 10 cents, Jim? Well, I was going to spend it, but I had a dream, and the dream told me to give it to a nigger named Balaam. Balaam's ass, they call him for short. He's one of them chuckleheads, you know, but he's lucky, they say, and I see I warn't lucky. The dream says let Balaam invest the 10 cents, and he'd make a raise for me. Well, Balaam, he took the money, and when he was in church, he heard the preacher say that whoever give to the poor, lend to the Lord, and bound to give his money back 100 times. So Balaam, he took and give the 10 cents to the poor, and laid low to see what was gwine to come of it. Well, what did come of it, Jim? Nothing never came of it. I couldn't manage to collect that money no way, and Balaam he couldn't. I ain't gwine to lend no more money 'thout I see the security. Bound to get your money back 100 times, the preacher says. If I could get the 10 cents back, I'd call it square, and be gladder to chanced. Well, it's all right anyway, Jim, long as you're going to be rich again sometime or other. Yes, and I's rich now, come to look at it. I owns myself, and I's worth $800. I wished I had the money. I wouldn't want no more. End of chapter 8.